Well, President Obama's candid remarks about race are also getting a lot of attention today.
He spoke to comedian Marc Maron on a podcast known for its raw language. And in it, he says that the United States has not overcome its history of racism. And he actually used the N-word to make his case.
I always tell young people in particular, do not say that nothing's changed when it comes to race in America, unless you lived through being a black man in the 1950s or 60s or 70s. It is incontrovertible that race relations have improved significantly during my lifetime and yours, and that opportunities have opened up and that attitudes have changed.
Yeah.
That is a fact. What is also true is that the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination in almost every institution of our lives, that casts a long shadow. And that's still part of our DNA. That's passed on. We're not cured of it. Racism. We are not cured of.
Clearly.
And it's not just a matter of it not being polite to say nigger in public. That's not the measure of whether racism still exists or not. It's not just a matter of overt discrimination. Societies don't overnight completely erase everything that happened 200 to 300 years prior.
And now for more on the president's comments, we're joined by Chief White House Correspondent Major Garrett. Major, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
What did the White House say in response to the president's remarks?
Well, Josh Earnest, the White House press secretary, told us a lot of things about this at the White House briefing. One, the president has no regrets about using the N-word, understanding its inflammatory power, its provocative power in the English language, its very explosive context in the long history of American language, how it's been used against African Americans as an epithet. But the White House press secretary took pains to say there wasn't anything particularly intentional about this. The president wasn't trying to draw attention to something he said before. Everything that you heard the president just say, with the exception of the N-word, he has said before. In context of Ferguson, in context of Trayvon Martin, in the ongoing racial dialogue of this country that has occurred during his presidency, this is not a new point. What is new is this particular word, which has such enormous power in our English language, and many African-American parents have tried to expunge from the language of their children, even though it is quite obviously a part of pop culture, and the rap culture to be sure. And Josh Earnest struggled a little bit with that, saying, I don't know what the president would say to parents who try to tell their children, hey, not even informally, don't use this word. We're trying to cleanse the American lexicon of this inflammatory word. So, one thing the president's press secretary tried to tell us, which I don't think is really believably true, that this president, who understands the English language, who uses it as well as any previous occupant of the White House, just came about this informally, and that it was an informal setting. This podcast was recorded in a garage in Los Angeles. Clearly, the president knew what he was doing, knew the power of this particular word, and knew it would drive a new and perhaps renewed conversation about a point he made previously. Whether the White House press secretary says that or not, I believe that is objectively clear.
Yeah, and Major, to that point, the president, when he was first elected, came on as somebody who wanted to make race part of the national conversation as being the first African-American president elected to office here. Has the president's views on race evolved since he's been in office?
I wouldn't say his views on race have evolved, and it's worth remembering. His first best-selling book, Dreams from My Father, used the N-word with some regularity. So the president, even in that book, which was sort of his first introduction after the speech in 2004, the Democratic National Convention, was sort of letting Americans know, I can rough the language up, or I can be real, or I can be street if I need to. This is the first time in his presidency he's ever gone down that road. And one thing I would say about the president is he does sort of tire of the cliches that surround our, if quote-unquote, national discussion about race. And perhaps he thought putting something that was a little bit tougher, a little bit more provocative into the bloodstream of that conversation might make it a bit more truthful. Whether that's exactly what the president was intending or not, that's certainly been the after effect.
Major, you know, gun control has also been an issue that has now, you know, been brought to the forefront in light of what happened in South Carolina. And during the president's remarks on the day after that this tragedy took place, he seemed very angry, very frustrated when he was talking about gun control and the lack of legislation that has been able to be passed. Is he working on any executive action regarding gun control right now?
No, he's not. And the White House made it clear after the president's remarks that it has exhausted all executive authority in the realm of gun control. It has put some new restrictions that have limited the access to some firearms under certain conditions that the federal government, through the executive powers of the presidency, has some influence over. But that's really nibbling at the edges, and administration officials admit that. The president really has two very distinct and contradictory messages on this. It's important, it's a priority. The country needs to reckon with this history of mass gun violence that he has seen, the president, happen more often than he's comfortable with in his presidency. But in the very same breath, the president says Congress isn't going to do anything about it. It's unlikely to change. I'm resigned to that political reality. All the avenues to create gun control at the federal level are foreclosed. And if the American people don't change their mind and don't change their political votes, this isn't going to change either. So that's where the president comes down. An advocate, but a resigned political figure, understanding his advocacy is very limited.
Yeah, Major, more than a dozen times the president has gone before the American people to talk about some kind of shooting, mass shooting in this country. Do we know if the president is expected to visit Charleston anytime soon, Major?
Well, the exact numbers are 14 times he's referred to mass shootings, 11 of those domestic. And we have every expectation here at the White House, this is not official, that when all of the various funeral arrangements have been made and decided, and that's a both painstaking and deeply grieving process in South Carolina, and a request for the president's presence is made, the president will be there. But there are no details before us at the moment. We just have every anticipation and expectation that the president, A, will be invited, and B, attend when the time comes.
Major Garrett from the White House. Major, thank you.
You got it.